Welcome to This Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're looking at a story that completely transformed the American landscape. We're talking about Donald Ross. Now, he started out as just a young Scottish boy, kind of observing the wind and the turf, right? But he grew into the man who literally revolutionized American golf course architecture. Whether you're a scratch golfer, a weekend warrior, or honestly just someone fascinated by brilliant landscape design, the sheer genius of how Ross shaped the earth, well, it's going to blow you away. Listen to this quote. "The finest golf holes appear so natural that they seem to have been discovered rather than designed." I mean, that single sentence right there, it perfectly captures Ross's entire nature-first philosophy. He wasn't about forcing human will onto the earth, you know? He was all about uncovering what was already there. So keep that idea of discovery in the back of your mind as we trace his incredible origins. Okay, let's dive right into this. Raised by the Lynx, Environmental Origins. To really understand the Craftsman, we first have to understand the environment that crafted him. So let's travel back to late 19th century Scotland. Looking at the grand trajectory of his life, we see Ross was born in 1872 in Dornoch, Scotland. From there, he eventually moved on to St. Andrews, where he was actually mentored by the legendary Old Tom Morris. Then, right before the turn of the century, in 1899, he crossed the Atlantic to Pinehurst, North Carolina. And man, from there, he builds this incredible legacy that lasts right up until his passing in 1948. So we're looking at a journey from the harsh, sweeping winds of the North Sea all the way to the vast, defining canvas of America. You see, growing up beside Royal Dornoch meant that golf wasn't just a sport for him. It was an everyday way of life. He didn't learn the game by sitting in a stuffy classroom or reading a textbook. No way. Instead, he learned by watching nature actually determine the strategy. He spent countless hours just watching players adapt to changing winds. He observed how golf balls would take these completely unpredictable bounces across the firm Scottish turf. That environment was his ultimate teacher, and those early lessons of adapting to nature, they never left him. Now, when he traveled as a young man down to St. Andrews, he studied under Old Tom Morris, and what Old Tom taught him went way beyond just basic greenkeeping. He taught him what we can call a vital rule of three: respect for the land, respect for tradition, and respect for golfers of literally every ability. Ross carefully observed how the old course challenged players, but it did it subtly, without all this unnecessary punishment. He admired its timeless simplicity, and those are the exact qualities he'd eventually weave into his own masterpieces. Which brings us to the Pinehurst Laboratory. This is a major turning point. By the late 1800s, golf was spreading across America like wildfire, and opportunities were booming. So in 1899, Ross accepted a job at a newly established resort with a man named James Walker Tufts. That resort was Pinehurst, North Carolina. Now, when Ross arrived, the place was still totally in its infancy. But looking at the terrain, the sandy soils and rolling hills immediately reminded him of Scotland. Instead of bringing in a bunch of heavy machinery to force these dramatic changes, Ross let the land guide his imagination. He looked at the natural contours and saw that every single ridge suggested a fairway and every hollow hinted at a bunker. Pinehurst wasn't just another project. It became his laboratory, his classroom, and ultimately his absolute masterpiece. At the time, there was a fascinating contrast happening in golf architecture. A lot of designers were building courses focused on dramatic visual punishment, hazards that basically shouted at you and instantly punished reckless aggression. Ross, however, went after something much quieter: subtle strategy. He wanted golfers to discover the challenge gradually. He rewarded thoughtful, strategic play over brute force. His designs didn't shout, they whispered, and they revealed their brilliance over many, many rounds, not just all at once. Let the land dictate. This philosophy of subtlety led to a really unique working process. You see, Ross rarely started his designs with blueprints just sitting on a desk. Instead, he took long walks. He hiked across hills, forests, and sandy ridges just to study the drainage, the natural elevations, and the prevailing winds. And this on-the-ground research translated into a very distinct course experience. He designed generous tees and inviting fairways to give players confidence, but he balanced that with incredibly demanding approach shots. It created this delicate, perfect balance, a course that was highly enjoyable and playable for your average golfer, but packed with enough strategic depth to test a true champion from the back tees. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is we're zooming in technically, the signature crowned greens. Because if Donald Ross has a definitive signature architectural hallmark, it is, without a doubt, his greens. So let's break down the anatomy of a famous Ross green, step by step. Step 1, they're usually slightly elevated from the fairway. Step 2, they are gently crowned, meaning they sort of slope away from the center to actively repel loose, sloppy shots. Step 3, they feature extremely firm surfaces that demand absolute precision on your approach. And finally, step 4, if you miss by even a few feet, your ball rolls right off into these subtle, delicate collection areas. And let me tell you, getting up and down from there isn't just about good technique. It requires serious imagination and careful reading. These greens are wonderfully, beautifully demanding. Which brings us to our final section, a timeless American legacy. We've looked at his granular design details, right? But now we need to pan out and really examine the massive, nationwide footprint Donald Ross left across the American landscape.
Part of why his legacy is so enduring is because Ross was never just a designer. He was a teacher, a greenkeeper, and a club professional. And all of these roles completely informed one another. Because he actually taught and understood real golfers, he designed better, fairer courses. Because he understood the literal dirty work of maintenance and greenkeeping, his designs aged gracefully and practically. His deep respect for nature ensured his courses never ever felt artificial. For Ross, the whole shebang was connected.
And this number brilliantly illustrates his impact: 400. By the end of his remarkable career, Donald Ross had either designed or heavily influenced more than 400 golf courses across the country. I mean, word of his genius spread like wildfire, bringing in commissions from New England, the Midwest, Florida, the Carolinas, Pennsylvania, you name it. And we're not just talking about any courses here. These were absolute masterpieces. Pinehurst No. 2, Oakland Hills Country Club, Inverness, Seminole, Aronimmick, East Lake Golf Club. The sheer caliber of this work is staggering. We're talking about venues that have hosted major championships for decades and are universally revered as the gold standard in routing and strategic design. He didn't build monuments to his own ego. He created landscapes that felt like they had simply always been there. Which brings us right to the core of his genius. It's summarized by this one profound question he asked himself on those long walks, way before moving a single shovel of dirt. What is this land already trying to become? He didn't ask how to reshape the property, he listened to it. So I want to leave you with that thought. The next time you step outside, whether you're on a golf course, hiking a trail, or just walking through a local park, try to look at nature a little differently. Ask yourself, what is this land already trying to become? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep discovering.